All right, everyone. Can somebody just confirm that you can hear me? I just want to make sure I've got a little slightly different setup today than I normally do. So can you give me a thumbs up or type in the chat? Can you hear me? Can't hear me.
Angelique?
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay,
I
great.
can
All right.
hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so thank you for joining. We've got a nice intimate group so far this afternoon, and I look forward to talking about this subject with you all. Just a quick heads up. So as you can tell, I'm in my car. I'm at a conference, and I just stepped out into my car. I'm not driving, so I'm just parked and I'm sitting in my back seat in order to take this call with you all. So I apologize in advance if there's any kind of weird noises. There was just a train that just went by, but hopefully we can still have a good session. And I'm going to go ahead and get just a reminder, we are recording. So for those that couldn't join, who can watch this later. And so I'm going to go ahead and get started with our topic for today. So let's see here. Okay, so as we've been doing, I'm going to go over the content, the focus content that we had for this session, split you all up into breakout sessions possibly, or maybe we just stay as a small intimate group, and then, but really want to make sure that you have time for Q&A, and then I'll talk about what's coming up next for us. So this last training that I suggested that you all participate in and take is really about emotional intelligence. It's about really understanding yourself, embracing your unique characteristics, and learning how to build the skill set and the mindset to take those unique traits and characteristics that are yours and bring them with you as you move forward in your career and as you move forward into leadership roles. And so this was a pretty meaty training module. I don't know if you've all have had a chance to get through all of it, but I do hope that you take the opportunity to really do the self-reflection that goes along with it. And so the main things that we talked about, or that I shared with you in this training, is I wanted you to discover your unique traits, talents, and skills, and also your values and your passions. I can't tell you how many senior leaders I work with who come to me because they really feel like they have veered off track from what they really care about. They feel like somehow along the way, and I will include myself in this, somewhere how along the way they started to take on responsibilities, started to take on roles, started to take on even personas that they thought they needed to in order to be successful, that they thought they needed to in order to get the recognition that they wanted. And they found themselves really lost because they no longer felt like they were tethered to the things that were really important to them. And so knowing that you all are really early on in your career and starting out, I want you to understand how you can keep that from happening by developing, first of all, an awareness about what you really care about, and then also developing these habits of self-reflection, of prioritization, the things that were in the training, so that you stay on your path. And then I also talked about, maybe there are things that you're doing right now that aren't serving you. Maybe you have habits, maybe you have behaviors that were probably really good for you at a previous time in your life, and now maybe they're not serving you. So how can you identify what those are and make changes as needed? And then understand and accept any past mistakes you may have made. And you're going to continue to make mistakes. So making sure that you're not so hard on yourself that it's debilitating, and that you recognize that, this was just part of your journey. Really hoping that you can understand how to trust your own judgment and not seek approval from others, whether they be peers, whether they be leaders, etc. And then really start thinking about, well, how do you want to show up as a leader? How do you want to show up as a member of your community, as your scientific and professional communities? And how can you embrace that now, so that, again, as you move forward, you will continue to be able to do those things? So that's really the heart of this module. And as I said, there's lots of self-reflection. But what I can tell you is that I really think this is super important that you do this now, because I meet so many senior leaders who didn't get these skills and mindsets and are really finding themselves and feeling like they're digging themselves out of a hole because of where they are, 5, 10, 15, 20 years later. And I wanted to just share maybe one thing of my own that I really is a limiting belief. It was sort of a something that I was holding on to from my past, and the power that really overcoming those feelings and what I call limiting beliefs about myself, how that really changed things for me. And this is actually fairly recently. So um I get asked to speak a lot. To young people, or younger in their career, earlier, just starting out, and I do that willingly, and I'm happy to do that, to share my journey with people. Except for I have been sort of low key politely declining to talk to anyone actually younger than college kids. I've never done that, and I would say, "Oh, I don't know that I have anything to offer. I don't really think that, that I'm so corporate. I'm old." I kind of come up with these self-deprecating humor to kind of just push this off. And the reality of the situation is, I really was afraid to talk to this group of people. And the reason I was afraid to talk to this group of people is because when I was that age, things were really tough for me. I mean, I was, bullied because I was a nerd. This is back in the, late 80s, early 90s. So I'm um, a mixed race person. And so that was something that was, heavily ridiculed at the time. And come from a military background. So there's very much a hierarchy and class system inside of the military. And so my father was enlisted, which is a certain rank, versus people who had higher ranking parents. And so there was just all these reasons why I just really struggled when I was a high schooler, middle school, and high school myself. And so as a result, I was just like, no, I'm just not going to deal with people of that age bracket, and really carried that with me up until honestly last year. So finally, last year, actually it was earlier this year, no, excuse me, earlier this year, one of my favorite clients, which is the University of Tennessee, asked me to speak to high schoolers at the Governor's School. And so you may know about that, but in Tennessee, it's so elite students from all across the state of Tennessee who were interested in science and engineering were coming together to the University of Tennessee campus for a couple of weeks to learn about things. And they're like, "Angelique, would you please come and talk with these kids? We think you'll have an inspiring story." And I was just like, "All right, fine. I'll finally get over this limiting belief." And so I really had to do a lot of self-reflection, really had to realize, you are holding yourself back for something that happened, 30 some odd years ago at this point. And what I ended up doing, and you see a picture there, I had a t-shirt of Big Bird, because they used to call me Big Bird the nerd when I was that age. And so I just wore the t-shirt, and I actually just told them. I got up on stage and I was like, "Look, I just got to tell you guys, I've never talked to people your age before, and here's why." And I shared my story. And then of course I gave them a bunch of leadership tips and tips about how to be an engineer, and things like that. And at the end, so high school kids are hard to read. So there were a couple questions. They basically just sort of stared blankly or looked at their phone, and I wasn't really sure how much my message was resonating with them, until the end, when a line formed, and 50, 60 kids came up to me and wanted to talk with me, because I had really shared that vulnerability with them, and they wanted to learn about, if I could do it, maybe they could do it too. And then people, I started talking to them, and then they wanted to take their picture with me, which I thought was crazy. It's like, why would you want to take a selfie with somebody like me? And so I mean, it turned out to be really a great thing, and really moved me. And I know that I had an impact on these kids who are just trying to figure out their way. And I just wanted to share that with you, because this idea of sort of not being able to show up as your true authentic self, I mean, it is a challenge for people at all stages of their career, at all stages of their life. And I think that it's something that you will be challenged with if you haven't already. And I want you to learn these skills so that you are not holding yourself back. So just a couple of things we talked about. It's, self-awareness is really the first step. So talked about how to increase your self-awareness, and what kind of tools you can do about that. Really, again, reevaluating your past, which is kind of the example that I just shared with you in my own life, how I really need to reevaluate how those things that happened years ago, how those might be impacting how I'm showing up today. And then the other thing that kind of main key theme in this module is about being proactive and really recognizing that these are things that you need to work on, and you need to really be proactive about them. What you don't want to have happen is that you find out in a performance review, or you find out as you're not getting opportunities, you realize, oh, well, you've got these behaviors that other people are seeing in you that are actually holding you back from your career. And you don't want other people to kind of tell you about those things. You want to be proactive in identifying what those things may be and solving them for yourself. So with that, I'm going to take a pause here and just see if any of you have any kind of major questions about this module yet before I kind of dive into some additional content. So I'm curious if you can put it in the chat, of course, or you can come off mute and share. But were there any kind of aha moments for you around this idea of self-awareness and potentially having limiting beliefs that might be holding you back? Would anybody care to share anything about that? So just type in chat. So any ahas? Yes, Lisa, go ahead. I don't see.
Yes. So for me, this module, I'm just gonna be this year. I wasn't able to finish all the modules.
Yeah, sure.
But this first one, I was very interesting. The aha moment for me was discovering my personal set of values. Like when you had it so structured, I was like, oh, I didn't know there was some structure behind that. And I was like, oh yeah, that's me. That's not me. That's me. So that was cool to put like words on things that are in the past have been like, that's what I want. What does it mean? Right. So, discovering that I'm more into like adventure and like making a mark in the world or relationships and things like that. That was like my aha moment. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I do think there's something, it can be very powerful to even just put like words and names to things that you might be feeling. And then when you can bring them out to sort of make some things that are just going on in the back of your mind, maybe even subconsciously, when you're able to bring them out and make them more explicit, then it becomes like, oh, okay, well, yeah, now I kind of know what to do. I can reinforce this thing that's important to me. And it's one of those things too, like if you've ever, if you've ever like thought of a red car or something like that, and then every time you go down the street, now you see a million red cars. It's like these opportunities start to surface when you've made things that are important to you go from just sort of like running behind you in your subconscious to the forefront. So I'm really glad to hear, Lisa, that you had that aha moment. So anybody else want to share any aha moments or questions about related to this topic? Okay, let's see. So
I can. I would like to say something else. I was waiting to see somebody else wanted to, but I what you were sharing about your personal experience, but also what you mentioned of other executives, people that have been in the business for a long time, and then they start this program or something, and they realize, oh, I wasn't in the right place, or this wasn't what young me wanted to do, or I never pivoted, or I didn't pivot enough. It really touched me because I think what you teach is so important to bring it to younger people, like you mentioned, and high schoolers and middle schoolers, because I believe, and I feel like when we're younger, we are taught to follow a path no matter what. And then we finish our undergrad and we get a job. We're like, okay, we made it. And we realized we spent so much time and we may not have been doing exactly what we wanted to do, or nobody told us, hey, if there's something wrong with what you're doing, or you don't feel like you thought you were going to feel, and you're young enough to pivot. Just because you already have a job, that doesn't mean you can't pivot. So I think teaching that at an early age would be very important. I think if somebody would have told me that younger, I would have switched my job, because I decided on my own to quit my job and go back to school and do grad school. But nobody told me this. Like, it was one of the scariest things I've done in my life, was quitting my job and going back to grad school. But then once I did it, I realized how amazing it is and how much I could pivot. What I'm trying to say is, the younger you are, and that somebody as knowledgeable and as impressive as you are, telling them it's okay. There are all these different paths. Figure out what you like, and if you don't know yet, we'll figure it out at some point. And just make sure you do that, so you don't regret it later.
Yeah, well, thanks for saying that. And I agree. I mean, in particular about like this sort of like self-awareness stuff, it is, I do think younger people I think it would benefit them, but I also think what I'm learning now as I'm raising young people, I've got teenagers, that they also have the capacity to understand it. Like, for whatever reason, I think there's this misconception that you have to have a certain number of years behind you in order to really be able to have this kind of self-reflection, and even, this understanding of what you're capable of, and that things can change. And I agree. I've been very pleasantly surprised as I work with younger people, how attuned they can be, and how much capacity they actually have for thinking about these things in this really kind of introspective way. And I will also say, I mean, and you mentioned it, but I also feel like it's really important for people at all ages to understand that it's never too late to pivot. I mean, just kind of talking about what you were talking about, for me, Lisa, it was terrifying to make this pivot I just made, 2 years ago, I guess at 46, right? So I was in corporate for such a long time, and I had this very clear trajectory. And then I decided to make this pivot into, running my own business and being a leadership coach. And it was terrifying. In fact, I when I was thinking about that, I started to see a therapist, and I meet with her on Wednesday morning. So I met with her this morning, and she was just sort of like, so remember when you remember those conversations we were having before? And she was doing a little bit of a retrospective just towards the end of the year, and really how terrifying it was, and how much I've grown, and how much I think what I would consider the success and the growth I've had has really been attributed to the self-reflection, the habit of the self-reflection, the habit of really doing the work to understand, okay, why do I really feel like I can't do this? Like, what is it? Is this true? Or is it something that I just need to kind of adjust about myself? Kind of understanding that there's actually a roadmap to kind of doing that, and being willing to put in the work to do it, I think has been hugely important for me. And I think it's something obviously that I want all of you to have as well. Okay, thank you. Any other comments before I'm gonna go into a little bit more content, maybe a little bit different content. So let me just share my screen here one more time. What I wanted to share, so we are starting to come to a close on this program. We've got a couple more weeks left. And one of the things that I wanted to share with you is a little bit more about the journey that you're on, and how I might be able to help you just as we wrap things up here. So you all came to this program for you're in various stages in your life, you're in various stages of your career, you have different goals. I mean, we all have these different experiences, even though, you're all at Georgia Tech, you're all at graduate school, you're all women, women graduates. And so there's a lot of things you have in common, but there's a lot of things that you have that are very different, very unique to your experience. And so I wanted to just share with you kind of 3 common experiences that happen in a coaching journey, and how we might be able to help you navigate, how I might be able to help you navigate those different experiences so that you get the most out of this program. So we're together for another month, and I really want to make sure that you get the most out of what I can help you with. And so the first experience that you might have, and I think you, Lisa, you even maybe talked a little bit, you say, I didn't know that. I mean, this is, you go through the training modules, or you hear me talk, or you guys talk amongst yourselves, and all of a sudden there's sort of like, oh, I'm trying to get from point A to point B, and I didn't know that there was a process or a step I could take. We talked last time about networking and how to proactively build your network and reach out to people and cultivate those relationships. Prior to that, we talked about goal setting. This time we're talking about, learning your values and really getting clear on those. And so you might just be like, oh, I didn't know that. That's kind of like the first experience that you can have, is just a new awareness of something about yourself or something about a skill. And that's really my goal with the trainings and the assessments that I put in this module, are to help you just have those aha moments. And so I do just want to remind you that you do have a leadership strengths assessment that you can fill out, and that kind of gives you some clues about some of the habits and behaviors that we've been talking about, where you stand on those, and you might say, oh, maybe I prioritize working on something else. The other trainings I guess we didn't talk a lot about is the communication training, so the STEM Insights Framework training that you guys have been working on your own. So that's really the one experience that you can have. Then the second experience you can have is you can say, yeah, I kind of already knew that, or maybe it's something new, but I'm not really sure how to apply that to myself. Maybe it either it's not clear exactly whether or not I'm in, that situation, or whether it applies. Or maybe you say, yeah, it applies, but I've got some obstacles that I've got to overcome. Maybe I'm working with a supervisor who isn't supportive of some of the, me trying to branch out, or me trying to expand my network, or maybe you feel like, yeah, I'm an introvert, and so I'm not going to do, these certain things. Not sure about that. Or, maybe, for example, some of you have really wanted to be in this program, but maybe you have a scheduling conflict, and you're like, okay, so how do I navigate? Like, I want to do self-development, but I'm not sure how to navigate, some of these obstacles. And so you have to figure out how to make these things that you're learning work specifically in your situation. And that's really what I'm hoping that these calls do. So first of all, you try some things and you realize it's not quite, or you're not quite ready to try it. You're like, Angelique, is this like, should I be doing that in this situation? And that's kind of what this implementation coaching is. So of course, we have these live calls. You also have access to me through the private messaging. So if anything comes up and you're just like, I need some help with this, I'm not quite sure how to navigate this, that's what that's for. And then the third thing is, we talk about these best practices, we talk about these habits, and something might come up and you're like, I know what you're saying. I know that I'm supposed to do that, but there's no way that I can do that. And that's kind of what I was telling you about with my, yeah, I know young people would probably benefit from what I say, but there's no way that I could do that. And that's because of my life experiences, and same with because of your life experiences, there's certain things that just seem somehow dangerous to me. Dangerous, makes me feel anxiety, makes me feel like, there's just, it will result in some negative thing happening to me if I actually try to take those actions. And, of course, my feelings of being scared to talk to high schoolers, I mean, some of you may think, okay, well, that's just crazy. And of course she would, they would benefit from her talking to her. But for me, because of my life experiences, it was a non-starter until I worked through it. And so I just want to say that, there may be things coming up for you as you're going through any of these modules where you just feel really like there's no way. And just how my being scared to talk to high schoolers was perfectly normal for me, and perfectly okay for me to have those feelings. Wherever you might be feeling stuck is perfectly okay for you. It's unique to your life experiences, and it's okay. And what we want to do, or what I hope that I can do, but more importantly, what you can do with each other, is to share your experiences, just like what I just did, where I shared the experience of that. And Elisa shared her experience, and many of you in previous calls have shared some of your experiences with, with networking, with interviewing, with working on your proposals, and some of the challenges with that. When you share your experiences, that helps us understand, oh, okay, I'm not the only one who's had these kind of feelings, and it's okay. And maybe I can try something that this other person tried to help me overcome, what some of those roadblocks are. And so I just wanted to share that with you. So there's, those are kind of the three things that typically come up. And we don't know where you'll be for various topics. What one person's, oh, I didn't know that, I'm just going to go and do it, could be another person's, yeah, but that's a dangerous thing for me to try. And so what I hope is that we all feel like, okay, yeah, I feel like this is a safe space, either to talk on the call as a group or to reach out to me individually, and we can kind of help you work through all of those things. Because again, these core habits of nurturing your network, proving your performance through goal setting and through communicating what your value proposition, and then mastering your mindset of kind of overcoming these limiting beliefs. These are the things that you are going to be doing from now until, eternity, until you are done. If you can master these things, these are going to propel you forward. And so we want to make sure that you're feeling comfortable in those experiences. So I'm going to stop here again, and I'm just going to share, is anybody feeling like, if anybody wants to share maybe what was a, like, I didn't know that opportunity that they had maybe throughout the course of our discussions. And then the second is, when it's like, how do I navigate that? And then the other one was yeah, but anybody want to share those kind of three different, if you've had any one of those three different experiences as we've been together? And feel free to put it in the chat.
Maybe I can share.
Yes. Go ahead.
I really enjoyed just learning about how to build your network and how to develop those connections. And I think it's really important that we all build time in to self-reflect about what we want in our career and how we want to be a leader. I think that that's a really important thing that oftentimes people don't consider. And it's important to have that self-reflection about who you are, but also where you want to go. So I think that that's been a great part of this program for me.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I agree. I mean, one of the things, well, both of the things you said, but, really the networking, I think the networking is one of those things where it's so easy to fall off the radar screen, because you don't really think about it until like you need the connection. And then it's too late, right? Because this is something that you need to build over time. And so I just appreciate that you recognize that it's like, yeah, you've got to find the time. You've got to kind of just make it a habit. It doesn't have to be anything big or take a long time, but yeah, it's one of those things, just like growing a garden or something, like you have to cultivate those things so that when you're ready to have the vegetables, you have them, and not panicking. So I'm glad that you are going to embrace that, Michaela. I appreciate that. That's great. Anybody else have any sort of things that they, either a new insight, or maybe something where you're like, yeah, Angelique, I hear you saying this is important, but I'm not quite sure how to navigate that in this context, whether maybe you feel like you don't have the time, or you're not quite sure, is that more of a corporate thing versus academia versus anything else? Any other insights that anybody wants to share? Okay. Then the last part that I do want to touch base on, so we didn't get a chance to, I'm going to pull something up on my screen here. We didn't get a chance to talk about it, and I know this was it was kind of a dense training, but I do want to talk about this communication stuff here. Just give me just a second here. I'm gonna actually pull that up on my screen. The technical influencer training. So that's one that you all we weren't able to have a group coaching session on that. So I wanted to just, I think my computer's being a little slow here. Hopefully you can still hear me. All right, I think I'm not going to pull up the screen because it's being too slow. So the technical influencer training is really about just a very simple, systematic, it's simple. It's a not complex. It's not not as in super easy, but it's a not complex methodology to convert really like all of your highly complex technical information. And almost you could even take like a publication or a poster and convert that, distill it down into an executive ready. And when I say executive, I mean interviewer or leadership person, or even, you know, as somebody who maybe doesn't have the subject matter expertise, but somebody you want to influence, and convert that into a brief, you know, 1 to 2 minute elevator pitch. And then also, you know, of course you can always expand things from there. And I will tell you, this is probably where I spend most of my time. In fact, the conference that I'm at right now, so I'm right outside of it's a big pitch competition, and it's all PhDs who have hard technology, and I spent the last 12 weeks with them working on how to come up with a slide deck where they can talk to investors. And so whether it's that, or if I've got somebody who's an executive and wants to get a C-suite role, and they want to kind of figure out how to communicate this complex information, this is really where I am spending a lot of my own personal time as coaching my clients. And so I just wanted to reach out to see how, if you all, first of all, if you had a chance to look at it, understand you may not have yet. And if you did, if you had any questions that I might be able to answer for you just about that process, or even just maybe executive communications in general. Any questions about communications? And I just want to, so Lisa, I see your note in the chat here, and I'm wondering if, I see you just going back, Lisa, you had something about finding the time, and I'm just, yeah, I know, I think that was probably about the networking maybe. And I'm just curious if like 30 minutes a month, if people could put 30 minutes a month to do some networking, if that could be a place to start, where you just sort of spend 30 minutes thinking about, okay, who's somebody I want to network with, and then reaching out to them, if people could potentially find 30 minutes a month to do that. Yes, that's very good. Okay, good. That's great. Yeah, any comments or questions about yes, I agree. I think I agree that all these things need to be put on your calendar. Same with kind of like a self-reflection. I think in our first module, we talked about the goal setting, we talked about the weekly review. And so I think I'd love to see, once a week, people spending just like 30 minutes saying, okay, how are things going? Am I on track? Not only with these tasks that I was supposed to be doing, because I think we're probably fairly good at that, but directionally, am I doing what I care about? Am I headed in the right direction? I think that's also something. Okay, so not much on the technical influencer. I will say, I'm going to continue to plug this because I really think it's important. I can't tell you, do you practice with non-technical? Do you? Okay, great. Yeah, I'll answer that question in just a second, Michaela. So I will continue to plug this because I think it's an area where, it is definitely an area where I see a lot of people missing great opportunities to really just shine, because they're unable to really clarify what they're working on in a layperson's terms. And I will tell you, you all are, by the time you get to the level that you are such an expert in your field that you forget how complex what you're working on is and how difficult it is for a layperson to understand. And so that's why I think it's really important to focus on this. And you might think, yeah, but my boss is an engineer. This is why I always used to tell my staff. So yes, I have a PhD in engineering. I do not have complete command over every expert detail inside of my organization. It just, and not only that, but the engineering skills I came to the job with are starting to erode because I now focus on business problems primarily. And so don't just assume because you're talking to another engineer that that they are going to understand your jargon, your expertise, anything like that. And also don't feel like you're talking down to them. Just start with your 1 to 2 minute elevator pitch in layman's terms, and then allow them to say, oh, tell me more about that detail, or, oh, I actually have expertise in that area. And then they can let them raise the level of expert jargon that's used. Don't just assume that they already have it. Yeah, I do think that Michaela, just answering your question that you have in the chat, I absolutely think it can be a good idea to try to talk with non-experts. Particularly, I think this is really important in like an interviewing situation. I think it would be great to just practice that, to practice your 1 to 2 minute elevator pitch. Of course, you can do that with me if you have something, or you can put it in our group if you want to just sort of get some feedback on it. But yeah, absolutely. I think that can be a really good idea to do that. And so if you have people that that can kind of give you feedback on it that aren't engineers at all, scientists or engineers at all, that could be super helpful. Okay. Anything else about? Okay. So at this point, I'm just going to leave it open. We have about 20 minutes left. I've covered the authentic leader module. I've covered a little bit about the technical influencer model. Is there anything else that you'd like to, I got one more slide. Let me just bring up this last slide just to kind of make sure you understand what is coming up. And then, excuse me, just a second. So, slides I was using just a second ago. I can get those up. No, I'm sorry. I think the fact that I'm out in my car is making me a challenge. But we've got one more session like this that is on the 26th of November. Sorry, not 26th. I believe it's the 29th. And what I thought I would do, and I'll post this in the group and also put it in our weekly email, is I'm going to open up office hours. So I'm working with a couple of other groups, and they've asked me to open office hours. So these will just be drop in. I'll give you the time. It'll be a Zoom link. You can get up to 20 minutes of a session, just private session with me. So there'll be a waiting room. And so I'll make office hours available for a few times before the end of the year, before we close out our session. And so I will communicate those to you as well. So last call for any kind of remaining questions or comments. And if not, we can end early, but I'll stay on the line here for another 5 or 10 minutes. And if you've got anything in the chat or want to just come off mute and ask me some questions, you can feel welcome to do that. Okay. Otherwise, we will. Yeah. Hi.
Hi. I just thought I'd ask a question. I don't know how related it is to what we were talking about, but in terms of being a small business owner, what things did you do that helped you decide to take that risk and that jump?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I did a couple of things. So one was really, I would say, just sort of personally really doing a lot of self-reflection about, is this really where I want to be going? And then very tactically, I put some products out in the marketplace to see if anybody would be willing to buy my services or my, what I had to offer. And so those two things put together were enough for me to feel like, okay, yeah, I could probably make a reasonable business out of this. If people are considering doing any kind of small business, whether it's, in the tech space, any kind of entrepreneurship, I really do recommend that you do that you put some product out in the market. So in my case, it was my book. I put that out and it did really well. And I thought, oh, okay, maybe there's people here there's an audience for this. And so then maybe I can also sell educational products and services and things like that. And so I strongly recommend that people like side hustle before they before they go all in, just to really get some market feedback and also build my own confidence that it was possible. And then internally, I had to really think through, is this something I really want to do? I really felt like I could do the actions required to sell products and services. I felt like I could do that. I really struggled with the professional identity piece. My whole career, I wanted to be, a C-suite executive. And I felt like that was like the symbol of me making it in my field. And so to say, well, if that's not my definition of success anymore, what is my definition of success? And will people think less of me if I'm not an executive anymore? So I struggled with that for a long time, which is hence the therapist. But yeah, and kind of coming into my own new identity probably took me the longest, more than, I wrote 2 books, and it took me longer to get my head right than it did to write the 2 books. Let me just put it that way. Let's put it that way. Yeah. Any other great question? Thank you for asking. Any other questions for me?
Thanks for sharing about that. I really enjoyed hearing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking. Yes, I'm an open book. Anybody can ask me anything about anything. All right. Well, I think we're about wrapped up. So again, thanks for joining. We'll have the recording. And yeah, we've got a couple more. We've got about a month left of interacting with each other, at least one more group session. I will open up some office hours if you want to talk with me one-on-one. And, if there's any topics or any questions, anything like that you want to cover in our last group session like this, then please let me know. I will also send you a link that you can actually input some questions and feedback if there's specific topics that you want to make sure you're covered. So with that, I will thank you all for your time, and I'll look forward to chatting with you next time. Okay, thanks everybody. Bye.